Ladies and gentlemen, colleagues, good morning and welcome to the Society of Antiquaries of London for what is a full day and which I hope promises to be engrossing and stimulating. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Scull, and I will be chairing the speaker sessions today before I hand over to Andrew Reynolds, who will moderate the concluding discussion this afternoon. I'm absolutely delighted to see such a full house, such a representation of the great and good, not only within the UK, but on a European basis as well. Those of you who might wish to relive the thrill of today will be pleased to hear that the event is being recorded and will be available to view on the Society's website from the end of next week. I'll just start with a few housekeeping notes. In the event of the fire alarm, the fire exits are located at the main entrance or at the back door on the ground floor next to the ladies' toilets. The men's toilets, of course, are just out of the door here, turn left at the foot of the stairs. The ladies' toilets are at the end of the corridor, so out, straight past the coat racks, straight on, and you not into them. Coffee, lunch, and tea will all be served in the council room across the lobby. And can I just ask at lunchtime, because there are quite a few of us and space is quite limited, when you've got your sandwiches, can you filter back into the lobby just to allow other people a chance to get to the food? Thanks. And so to today's business. Chronological discrimination is of fundamental importance to archaeology. If we aspire to read dynamics of ideology, politics, cultural practice, and economics from material culture patterning, then we need reliable chronological frameworks. And the more precise the chronology, then the more sophisticated and robust our archaeological explanations. This has been a particular issue for the study of the 5th to 8th centuries in England. This was a period, of course, of profound and complex transformation, but the usefulness of archaeological data in addressing the character and pace of cultural change has been seriously constrained by the lack of fine chronology. When we began the radiocarbon dating project in the 1990s, chronological studies were unfashionable in Anglo-Saxon archaeology, and there was something of a consensus that the issues were intractable. Reaction against a culture-historical approach that had privileged a typo-chronological study had thrown out the baby with the bathwater to the extent that archaeologists interested in social and economic processes in the 5th to 8th centuries were using crude chronologies that in some cases were 50 to 70 years out of date. That is no longer the case. When we combine the results of the Scull analysis with the regional chronology for East Anglia proposed by Ken Penn and Deirdre Brugman, and link this to the national sequence established by the Radiocarbon Project, we have the backbone of a fine chronology from the 5th century to the end of the 8th century. And this is reinforced by site-specific studies such as that from Dover-Buckland. Now, the impacts of this are deep and complex, and they will take quite a long time to work through in detail. However, we can already see major implications for our understanding of migrations to Eastern Britain in the 5th century, for our understanding of complexity and dynamism in burial practice throughout the period, in the identification of a major horizon of cultural change in the 3rd quarter of the 6th century, and in the evidence for the abandonment of furnished burial by the end of the 7th century, if not earlier. These studies do not, however, provide a universal or comprehensive framework, nor is the new framework that is emerging entirely without its own problems and issues. It is selective. It deals with culturally Anglo-Saxon material and with graves and grave finds. And so although it is applicable to settlement or other contexts which have the same material culture types, it does not, for example, address wider ceramic chronologies, items less well represented in burial, or indeed the areas of Western North Britain. It is geographically circumscribed, especially for the earlier part of the sequence. Scull is a single site analysis, the Penn and Brugman is a regional scheme, and the national study includes regional biases that need to be addressed. We can be reasonably confident that our conclusions are generally applicable, but there is a need for further regional and site-specific analysis. Although this is a robust relative chronological sequence, it is anchored by scientific dating only from the earlier 6th century. There are some unresolved questions around the integration of scientific and material culture chronologies, in particular a disagreement between scientific dating models and current numismatic chronologies for the later 7th century. And finally, we have to remember that seriation generates models, not realities. Although we believe our models to be robust and useful, it is in the nature of the data and the process that there will be some apparent anomalies. I know Catherine and Sam will point to some of these, particularly the relationships between Sponhill graves 31 and 40 in seriation and in stratigraphic reality. We have to be aware then that the framework needs to be applied critically and it needs to be re-evaluated periodically against new data and analysis. However, the results of these projects have demonstrated beyond doubt the usefulness of the bundle of techniques that they have used. In particular, rigorous typological analysis and seriation by correspondence analysis, and their use in combination with scientific dating techniques and Bayesian modelling. Now, a major issue is how widely these are applicable to other data sets and contexts, in particular settlement sequences. And I'd like to emphasise, I should emphasise, that the radiocarbon project focused on human inhumations for a period when the proportion of radiocarbon in the atmosphere was changing rapidly, and so for which the calibration curve is favourable. And it used a population sample for which dietary factors had not significantly affected radiocarbon determinations. Other materials, such as chromatic bone, other contexts, other periods and other areas may face more serious constraints as a result of such factors. And this is something that our colleague Alex Bayless will be expanding upon in her talk. I should emphasise too that the application of these techniques is based on the building blocks of stratigraphy and context. That is, the integrity of sequence and association, which, as the Sponhill study demonstrates, remain fundamental to site-specific analysis. And although their results and methodologies are complementary, there is a contrast between the two projects arising straightforwardly from their data and their aims. Sponhill is a single site analysis deploying stratigraphy, typology and seriation, as opposed to analysis of a national sample using typology, seriation, radiocarbon dating and mathematical modelling. Nonetheless, these projects establish a new framework which we believe is useful and as a baseline for the future research that will necessarily test and refine current models. And indeed, the radiocarbon project dataset is available online and has been designed as an active resource so that users can add new data and remodel our results. Now, today has been structured so that we will hear about the major results, the nature and wider applicability of the scientific and statistical methods employed, the European context in which the results must be considered, and the issues of integrating numismatic and scientific chronologies for the later 7th century. These all have implications for archaeological interpretation and future research agendas, and for research and fieldwork practice and curatorial decision making. Now, the reason for holding this seminar is, in current jargon, to enhance the impact of our research results by sharing them and by opening the issues arising to discussion with peers and colleagues across the profession. And some major issues, which I hope we will return to in the concluding discussion this afternoon, are set out on this slide, centring around research agendas and priorities, research and fieldwork practice, and curatorial practice. Finally, I should like to make the point that both of the projects which prompt today's seminars are the results of work over the long term. We began the radiocarbon project in 1997, and although it was delayed by circumstances, the iterative methodology and the limited capacity for high-precision radiocarbon dating required a long project timetable. The Sponhill analysis, which goes far beyond mere chronology, is the triumphant capstone to a project that began 40 years ago. It seems unlikely that either could have been run under current Research Council funding regimes, and we owe a debt of gratitude to English heritage and its predecessors, who were prepared to invest for the long term and, in the case of the radiocarbon project, to support innovative and risky interdisciplinary experiment. And I think that there may be a lesson in this. We have allowed today time for questions to individual speakers after each paper and a general discussion session to close the seminar. If I could ask you, when you are asking a question or raising a point of discussion, to stand, identify yourself, and if you can't project, to use the roving microphones. There'll be one moving from the front and one moving from the back. And finally, in closing, I'd like to thank the Society of Antiquaries of London and English Heritage for their support in organising this seminar,